Welcome again to part 3 of our series, Jesus and Mental Health. Part 1 of our series, we took a sober look at where is Jesus in the midst of anxiety. Part 2, last week, we took a look at where is Jesus in the valley of the shadow of death. Where is Jesus in deep grief? Today, we're taking a look at where is Jesus in the valley called depression. I want to begin this morning by just sharing a true story on my friend Brad. I've known Brad for a long, long time. We go back to school together. Brad will share with a few people in his life that his struggles with clinical depression are cyclical in nature, which means sometimes it's front and center. It's dominating. It's everything. It takes over in his life. Other times it's kind of riding in the back seat as a passenger somewhere back there. But he's never truly free from it. It's always kind of around. It's always traveling with him. It's always in his orbit. The thing about the struggle that Brad has with his particular depression is that if you would meet him in the lobby, if you'd meet him at the store or over coffee, especially if it was a smaller group of people, maybe one-on-one or maybe 3 people, like you would walk away and say, man, Brad is a great guy. Brad is awesome. Brad is encouraging. Brad is kind. Brad is so extraordinarily generous. But you also wouldn't know that there was a huge struggle just to get out of bed in the morning for Brad. Like putting his feet squarely on the ground and getting himself ready for the day. Like took almost everything out of him. That conversation that you got to have, that you were blessed to have with Brad, and that you probably walked away encouraged as a result of it, that took more than whatever he had left. That he walked away from that conversation and he went home. It doesn't matter what time of day it was, noon, 2 p.m., and he crawled into bed under the covers, and you wouldn't see Brad until the next morning. That's like the hidden side of this. And I share the story about my friend Brad, not his real name, by the way, but because you have a Brad, you have somebody in your life. By the way, as we move into this time, as we talk about the Brads that we have in our life that we love and that we care for and that we want to see Jesus best in their life, I want to also share that we have a Brad in her life. I have a Brad in my life, a friend of mine. We'll stay in touch. Also, I recognize sometimes preachers, we have this trope, we have these preaching tricks around us when I'm I got this friend, Brad, and I talk extensively about my friend Brad, and at the end of the message, the preachers are oh, and by the way, I'm Brad. I'm not Brad, okay? He's a real person, but I'm not Brad, right? So the point is, you're Brad sitting in the chair, or you've got a friend who's Brad that you're sitting next to, or that you're maybe journeying along through life with. And we're talking about that. And we're having an open conversation about that because for so often in the church, we get this thing wrong. Because Brad's experience in the church is that the church should be, ideally would be, the safest, most gracious, and hospitable place to talking about depression in the world. That this is the place that he could say, on the outside, I'm an extremely happy person. On the inside, I'm extraordinarily hopeless. But I can't say that because when I do say that, I'm often kind of met with this Brad, you got so much going on in your life, man. You've got family, you've got kids, you've got a great job, a huge career ahead of you. And objectively, you look at a guy like Brad and you're he does so much. But then when you point those things out, what depression does, the lens that he views life through, and because he can't help it because of this thing, because of this disease, he can't help but look at it and go, great, I do have all those things. And I'm still not happy. And I'm still not content. And I find no rest. And now in addition to all of the hopeless, dark, fearful feelings I'm experiencing right now, those emotions right now, I also feel guilt. How could I be so ungrateful, right? And you point out, but you also have a Savior. You also have Jesus who conquered sin and death on your behalf, and he'll resurrect you to new life in heaven one day. And he goes, great, now I feel shame. It's what do you do for Brad? What do you do if you are Brad? And I just want to point out 2 truths this morning. I'm going to keep coming back to these. Is that number 1, you are not alone. And number 2, that there is hope. Specifically, what hope looks like at Encounter Church this morning is the website, encounterchurch.org/help. Hotlines, counseling referrals, forms to fill out. I would love to journey with you through this valley. We have other staff, pastors, friends in the community who would love to journey with you to show you you are not alone and there is hope on the other end. On the side of you're not alone. 1 in 4 women will be diagnosed with clinical depression at some point in their lives. That's a lot of people. You think you've got a group of 4 friends. 1 in 4 will be diagnosed. For men, it's a little bit different. 1 in 10 men will be diagnosed with clinical depression. Supplementary research seems to indicate that it's because of the stubbornness of men and their unwillingness to talk about it and to get help is the result of why those numbers are so different. It reminds me of that billboard, that sign was a meme going around for a while, where it's encouraging men to just go see a doctor, right? And to take care of themselves. And the billboard is 1 in 15 men will die of stubbornness. And somebody takes red spray paint over the top and crosses it out and says, no, we won't. We've got a lot of stuff that we're processing through as men. You're not alone, and there is hope. As we move into this, I recognize that we got a lot of guests with us this morning, and maybe this is going to be shared with somebody. And you might not have caught part 1 several weeks ago in the series. And I want to introduce a term to us, and something that we started laying the groundwork for in part 1, Jesus and Anxiety. The term for this is psychosomatic unity. I'm not going to have you say that, but the term psychosomatic unity is a recognition, is a belief that we hold that we are a unified body, that we are unified creatures, that there is a biological, physiological, relational, emotional, and spiritual angle onto this thing. And you can't separate them all out. What psychosomatic unity simply means is that God created us as a unified person, and you can't separate these things. Which means that as we walk with Brad, as we walk with those in the valley of this particular shadow, it means that we're not going to simply pray this thing away, even though we will pray without ceasing. It also means that we're not simply going to separate out and prescribe this thing away, although there likely will be a time when a referral will happen to take place, and we'll see somebody who will make a prescription, and we'll follow up on that with gratitude to God. We will not simply exercise our way out of this, but there is this physiological thing where it does show to help, right? We are a unified creature. We are a unified people. And just a small example of this is me on a Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. Just to highlight the amount of Christian maturity that comes into my life with an hour of a nap on Sunday afternoon, right? Because I pour everything in, and I'm so kind, and I'm so nice to all of you, on Sunday, right? And I try to hide all the stress and everything and the transitions and all that going on, and smile the whole time, and then smile when I'm especially nervous. I don't know what's coming up next, right? But just grin, and we'll make our way through it. And then 2 p.m. comes around, and I'm kind of nasty with the people that I love most in my life, my family. And then it's hey, Dirk, I think maybe you just need to lay down for a little while. I'm not asking, I'm telling you, please go lay down for a little. And the amount of Christian maturity that comes into my life in those 60 minutes, I'm a unified person. We're a unified person. These things are all tied together. And today I'm going to share some truths with you. I'm going to share some truths from Scripture that are going to highlight spiritual realities in our lives and where is God and what we can do. And as we do that, you might walk away from this time going, man, that guy talked a lot about Jesus. He talked a lot about the Bible. Does he think that this is only a spiritual element of this thing, that there aren't these other realities? No. My tendency to stay on Jesus and to stay on the scriptural truths is a recognition, not that it's only a spiritual issue, but a recognition, I know what my lane is, and I know what the context of this time is. It's worship. It's an encounter with the living God and his Son, Jesus Christ, and by his Holy Spirit. There's hope, and you're not alone. You're in excellent company. You're in the company of a cloud of witnesses. And true story, when I started asking around, what are the stories of depression in the Bible? What are the stories that I could highlight to show people that you're not alone? As a staff and as friends, I was reaching out, and we came up with a list so long, there's no possible way. There is a cloud of witnesses to show you that you are not alone. Today that word comes to us from 1 Kings chapter 19. And I'd love to go through it with you. 1 Kings 19, we drop in on the prophet Elijah, and we see his bout, his struggle with depression. And the first thing that I want us to see about 1 Kings 19, about the prophet Elijah, is the context that this story happens. He just goes up on top of a mountain. He goes head to head, this spiritual duel with his rival, King Ahab, Queen Jezebel. He shows down 450 prophets of Baal on that mountain. God rains down fire from heaven, lighting up the altar. Everybody around says there's no God but Yahweh. Can you believe the God of Elijah? I mean, it's like this spiritual high that this story takes place on. It's an incredible story. Outside of that, Elijah had experienced firsthand the power, protection, and provision of his God. He meets a widow of Zarephath, saves her life. He goes on from there. He finds a sick boy who turns dead. He raises him to life. I mean, again and again and again, the story of the power of God in Elijah's life is just incredible. And so often is the case, it's these moments of extraordinary highs where we're met with extraordinary lows. 1 Kings 19, verse 1. Ahab told Jezebel everything that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. By the way, that happened. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I don't make your life like that of one of them. Ahab puts Jezebel in charge of this whole thing. It's kind of this old saying, if you're not the man for the job, find a woman to do it. Jezebel is the woman for the job. Shrewd leader. Unfortunately, leading for the wrong team, but a shrewd leader nonetheless. What just happened in the story, he just had this showdown with Baal. What I mentioned, fire from heaven lighting up the altar. All the people gathered around. There is no God but Yahweh, the God of Elijah. Put our faith, put our hope in him. I mean, the stock of Elijah is running high at this moment, objectively. Like people are gathered around, they're saying, I think we got to check this thing out. This might be the way to go. See, Jezebel knows and Ahab knows that they can't just go and send an officer. They can't send an executioner to go take Elijah. Because his stock is running so high, there's going to be rebellion in the streets. There's going to be this uprising. Jezebel, as crafty as she is, as shrewd as she is, she doesn't send a bailiff. She sends a messenger to bring him this message. Oh, by the way, your head is mine if you show your face in here again. And so she drives him away. She puts him out. He's running away, which is exactly the intent that she was hoping to have. Because if she arrested him, if she killed him, there'd be this uprising. But if he ran away, she's going, well, then we can get on with our lives. And he takes the bait. Verse 3, Elijah, afraid, and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there. That's an important fact that we're going to come back to. While he himself went another day's journey into the wilderness. He ran from the mountain. He ran all the way to Beersheba. Roughly 100 miles. All at once. As fast as he possibly could. Couple of ultra marathon. Some of you ran Grand Rapids Marathon a little while ago. I know. I watched it on social. I wasn't going to call you out. I was invited. It was Sunday morning. I had other plans. That's fine. That's fine. Some of you ran the Grand Rapids Marathon 26.2 miles. It's impressive. Imagine crossing that finish line and then running 3 more marathons. This is Elijah. And he drops his servant. We'll come back to that right there. And then he goes another day's journey into the wilderness all by himself. And so he came to a broom bush, and he sat down, and he prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. I wanted to find something good for you about the significance of the broom bush, the broom tree. I spent my week just studying Middle Eastern horticulture, pictures of trees, broom trees, etc. There's got to be something. Why this particular kind of tree? I have no idea why it was this particular kind of tree. But I think God knew about this moment. I think God knew about Brad's moment. I think God knew about your moment. And I think God knew that at times words fail. When you can't get out of bed in the morning, when you put on a happy face like everything is fine, but inside you're absolutely hopeless, that you wouldn't have something to call it. I don't know, but I think the Spirit of God that inspired these words thousands of years ago lives inside of each one of us. And I think he knew that words would fail. And he knew that we just needed to say, it's a broom bush moment. Forget about getting out of bed. Forget about the chores that I want to do. Forget about the job that I want to go to. It's this broom tree moment. And I don't know how else to describe it. And so that all of us would say, Brad's got a broom tree moment, and we're going to surround him. We're going to love him through this thing. And he doesn't need to describe it anything else because we've got 1 Kings chapter 19. And he just gifts us this kind of language to saying, I'm in this place where I'm sitting in the shade just for a moment. And I'm praying, God, if you love me, you will take my life right now. It's a hopeless moment. It's a broom tree kind of moment. Before we go on, before we see what happens next in the story, before it would be worth our time, there will be spiritual fruit for our labor to highlight in the story these 4 warning lights that suggest how we got here and what went wrong. Now, I want you to hear this with the appropriate heart behind it, because when I share these things, there's a temptation to experience them as if Elijah did something wrong, and it's not that. It's the depression, it's the conspiring against him. If you're Elijah and if you're having this broom tree moment, resist this temptation to think, I'm doing these 4 things wrong. No, I'm sharing these things as a way of highlighting. These are warning lights going off that suggest something's wrong in somebody else's life. Something's wrong in Elijah's life. I'm sharing these 4 things with you because I want you to be able to recognize what's happening with the Elijah in your life, with the Brad in your life, with the broom tree in your life. This isn't for you if you're having a broom tree moment. This is for the other people around you to highlight if these 4 things are going wrong. The first thing that we can see that Elijah does is that he runs himself into the ground. You know, I mentioned the thing about the marathons. He goes 100 miles, leaves his servant behind, and then he goes another day's journey into the wilderness. 4 marathons. It's not possible. You're running yourself into the ground. Sometimes we have this tendency to look at super high achievers around us and go, man, how do they do it? Right? 4 o'clock a.m. for the Jesus time, 4:30 for the gym time. Make sure to get back in time to get the kids ready for school going on. I go to work, just crush it all day long. You can see it on social media. Come home, parent time with the kids, play the card games, watch Bluey like we know we like to do, right? Laugh at the appropriate times. I'm not disengaged on my phone. I'm fully engaged. And then spouse time, devotions to close of the night. Wake up the next morning and repeat. And everybody else is going, how does she do it? How does he do it? Answer, she doesn't. She's running herself into the ground. He's running himself into the ground. It's not healthy to do it all. You see these things, and it's warning light. Something's wrong. They might not be in a broom tree moment right then, but it's a warning that something just quite isn't there. Second thing, Elijah, he shuts people out. Remember the servant that I mentioned? Hold on to that one in verse 3. He comes to Beersheba. He takes the servant. He takes the person that's probably closest to him in his entire life, who knows him like no other. And he says, you wait here, I'm going to go the rest of the way alone. It's dangerous territory. But that's what this thing does, right? We have a saying around here that we do life together. The inverse of that is also true. You cannot do life alone. Church, we have this picture of the body of Christ in Corinthians, where Paul says this is what it's like to be in community. This is what it's like to be on this journey with Jesus, is that each one of us, we're a member of the body, like an arm, a leg, an ear, an eye. You can't go it alone. It doesn't make any sense for the ear just to cut itself off and say, no, I'm going to do my own thing. Like, you are incomplete without the rest of the body in the life. You can't do life alone. Life is better together, which is why we have that saying that we do life together. He shuts people out. Elijah, he focuses on the negative. Take my life. He goes, I am no better than my ancestors. Spoiler, his ancestors did not have a very good track record. I am just like them. I'm incapable of seeing the power of God at work in my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. Focusing on the negative, I'm never going to get into the college that I want to go into. I'm never going to be the parent that I want to be. I'm never going to be out of this financial mess. It's just going to be a struggle day after day, week after week, month, year after year. The future is never going to look anything different than it does right now. He's focusing on the negative. I have a friend who says, in the midst of it all, I need help. I need help to distinguish between what's true and what's the disease. And I think that is so incredibly powerful. That's so wise to say in the valley when depression sets in, I can't see what's true, and that's why I need community. That's why I need help, not to just focus on the negative. I need to see what else is going on around me. This is my reality. Is that true? No, it's not. That's the disease. This is what's true. Elijah's no different. He's in the depths. He's in the valley. This thing has got him. Has got a hold of him. And he can't see the power of God. He can't see that a chapter ago he had a conversation with his buddy Obadiah, another prophet. A chapter ago we learned that there's 100 prophets stashed away in a cave. That God is like sequestering them away just so they'll be ready for the time when he goes public and the time when the world would know. But he's focusing on just the negative. And the fourth warning light that something is wrong is that he simply forgot about God. Every step of the way God was present, every step of the way God provided, every step of the way God protected him in this journey, often supernaturally so. And Elijah just forgot about it. And the turn in the story is so beautiful. He's sitting under this tree. And his prayer to God is that if you love me, you will take my life now. He forgot about the power, the miraculous, saving, helping, healing, protecting, guiding power of God in his life. But God did not protect. God did not forget him. And so he lays down, verse 5, under the bush, and he fell asleep. And all at once, an angel touched him and said, what do you think he said? Whoops. He doesn't put on his big T.D. Jakes, Bishop T.D. Jakes with the big baritone voice that I wish preachers had. I wish I had that. A little bit of it today. But he doesn't put on this voice and be like, you know what, Elijah? This is God's setup. Ready for you, for your comeback. He doesn't bring up these kind of aphorisms. He doesn't bring up these things. The angel doesn't meet him there and say, who are you to complain about this at this very moment, right? Scholars point this out and say that the word touch there is kind. It's tender, that he's asleep and the angel kind of nudges him just a little bit and says, hey, buddy, it's time to wake up. Now we can go to that line. goes, get up and eat. And he looked around, and there by his head there was some bread baked over the hot coals. This is where we get our recipe for angel food cake. It isn't. That was a terrible joke. A jar of water. Let's move on. And he ate and he drank, and then he lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back a second time, and he touched him. And with kindness, with compassion, with tenderness, he touched him. He woke him up. Hey, buddy, get up and eat. And this line, right? The journey is too much for you. It's such a better line, especially when the temptation, the alternative to that one is to say, hey, get up, have something to eat, because God will never give you more than you can handle. No. Full-on recognition, the journey that God has out ahead of you, and I don't care if you're Elijah from 1,000 years ago, more than, or you're you sitting in church today, whatever journey that God has in store for you, and I'm telling you, it's too much for you. If he's giving you a task to complete, if he's giving you an assignment to tell your neighbor, your friend, your coworker about the hope that you have in Jesus, I'm telling you, the journey is too much for just you. If your assignment ahead of you is in the midst of depression, to reach out and to ask for help, to take those 2 feet of yours and to put them outside the bed and plant them squarely on the ground, I don't think it's a stretch to say to that person, the journey is too much for just you. You need help. We need help. Every single step of the day, the journey is too much for you. So he got up and he ate and he drank, and strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. And there he went into the cave and he spent the night. And this is when the temptation, a lot of the time, is to skip and to like go ahead and to be like, hey, and there was a fire, and there was an earthquake, and there was a great wind, and the voice of God giving him the next assignment. And the thing that he feared most, right, death. Jezebel was chasing him. He didn't want to die, so he's like, I don't want to die by Jezebel, so like, God, just take me right now, do it your. All of this fear that he had about death, he didn't actually even die. He finds a successor. He finds Elisha. He makes Elisha the person to take his place. And then God comes down, gives him a chariot. He's one of the only people in the Bible not to die, but to go up to heaven in this whirlwind chariot ride. Like, come on. Right? It's a powerful story. It's an awesome story. We're not going into all of that because right here, we just see that he goes into a cave and he sleeps. And by the way, he goes to Horeb, Mount Sinai. He goes to Horeb. 40 days and 40 nights wasn't that far. I mean, it was a ways. It was a 12-day journey, but he makes it 40. He makes it 40 days. He makes it 40 nights. I think he wants to highlight something for us. The journey that he went from Beersheba to Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, same place, was the same trip that the Israelites took in the book of Exodus so long ago. It's the same trip that took them, what should have been a 2-week journey, into 40 years. Elijah goes through, he recreates this trip, being sustained with angel food cake, being sustained with a little bread and water on the trip. I don't think that the moment should be lost on us that God sustained him the same way that God sustained his people in the wilderness so long ago, bread for a day. Waking up in the morning, every day during the 40 days, or for the 40 years, and finding a little manna, our daily bread. And the thing about manna, it's not the end. The thing about manna is it's just bread for a day. Church, you know Brad. You know Elijah. You know somebody in the midst of depression. And we are not so naive to think that one sermon, one time of worship, one prayer, one referral is going to lift us out of that evil thing. But by the grace of God, what we have is bread for a day. It's manna for a day. Nourishment for just one more day. And this bread for a day, this manna, It's a down payment on the feast that is to come. It's a down payment on the feast that we get to read about at the end of days in the book of Revelation, where Jesus himself wipes away the tears from our eyes, and he says there's no more mourning, and there's no more crying, and there's no more pain, and there's no more depression, for that old order of things is gone and is washed away. Here is your daily bread. I've invited my friends Joe and Emily to come on, join me on stage today as a way simply to share with us some of their daily bread that they've got to experience. Thank you both so much for being here today and for sharing your story with us. As you know, one of the hopes that we have is to let everybody in our community know that we're not alone and there's hope. This is Joe Hayes, pastor of our Fulton Heights location. Thank you for being here. And Emily, who's courageous enough to share some of your story with us today. Would you mind just beginning that story with us?
I would love to. Hello. First of all, I want to thank you, Dirk, for studying for this teaching. This was really important and meaningful. So thank you. I know that was a lot of work to prepare for this one. We're going into very dark territory here, and it's so important. And I'm so thankful to be here with you and with all of you, because 3 years ago, I did not feel like I had the will to go on. And so I'm just thankful for every day, and I'm thankful for this day, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to share. In 2019, I started experiencing what I thought were like mysterious physical symptoms, but were really some pretty severe anxiety and depression symptoms. Went to the doctor, continued to go to different appointments, not really accepting depression diagnosis. Blood work came back mostly normal. There was a thyroid imbalance that was fixed, and after that was fixed, I continued to go back to the doctor. Brain scans came back normal. There was nothing wrong with me. I was healthy, and the doctors graciously sort of suggested medication, and I thought that there was something else going on. I really didn't accept that as a diagnosis. And so just tried to take care of myself and did start to learn about mental health, and just thought I could really truly beat it with prayer and self-care, which absolutely is a part of it, but my condition continued to get worse. And then when the pandemic hit, and our resources, everyone's resources, were taken away, right? And we were shut indoors, I spiraled very quickly to a very dark place, to the point that you were talking about with Brad, who struggles daily with very, very simple tasks, and that guilt and that shame, going, everything is fine, I have so much, I am physically well, why can't I just do life? That guilt and that shame and that negative thinking, was so real for me. And by Easter weekend, that first Easter weekend, right in the middle of the pandemic, I had completely given up. I shut down. I wouldn't get out of bed. I told Joe that I wanted to die. And he drove me to the emergency room, where I checked into a psych hospital for the weekend. And a psych hospital was something that I had always feared. And for months I thought about maybe going, but I had always feared going to a psych hospital. And on the inside, I was met with such grace. The nurses were loving, and the other people there were just like me, and nervous and scared and in need, desperate need of help. So that's where I spoke with a psychiatrist about starting medication, and she explained to me SSRIs, which is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Thank you. Which suddenly didn't seem so scary to me anymore, and she explained to me how it works, and I left 3 days later hopeful that I could get better, but still pretty shaky. I began therapy with a new therapist via telehealth because everything was still shut down at the time, but I really started to cherish these 1-hour phone calls. We didn't even do FaceTime because I felt like that was like distracting, and so I talked with her on the phone once a week, and she was so loving and so helpful. And during that time, we decided to move. We were living in California at the time. So we decided to move back to Michigan, which was also helpful. But I started to feel stronger, and I remember my therapist saying, "You're gonna beat this. You're gonna get better." And I remember not believing her, but here I am now, and I think about that all the time. And I do feel stronger, and I do feel better, and I'm so thankful for therapy and medicine and the grace and love of my community, and ultimately for God's grace.
Emily, one of the themes that we have this morning is about how God meets Elijah and us and provides bread for a day, sometimes just breadcrumbs. What were some of those breadcrumbs that he gifted you with? Maybe a sign that you weren't alone, maybe a sign that there is hope for the future.
Yeah, encouraging words were those breadcrumbs from friends, prayer, scripture, just even a laugh at my negativity when I would vocalize those thoughts of guilt and shame and negative thinking. Just a giggle from a friend and something that corrected that thinking and gave me the truth that my life is precious. There's so many other breadcrumbs. Prayer, being in the moment, sunset, taking all of God's blessings in.
Joe, during this journey, you have a unique perspective, as we all do. You got to experience firsthand in a way that I think a lot of us can relate to. What were some of the things that you learned along the way?
I think as a pastor, I approach this as a pastor and a manager. And I think while the intention was good, it was not a helpful place to start.
Yeah.
Because I think for a long time, and I think I was trying to learn this throughout our marriage up to that point, but I was trying to supervise this away. While I wanted to fix it for you, I couldn't do that. And so to start to shift my perspective and to come more as a supporter for you was really, really helpful, and it took me far too long to realize that. Because I was projecting, this is how I would fix this. I would just buckle down, and that was not helping the situation. So not trying to manage it. And then I think what I learned to do rather was to support, and a lot of the time that showed up is just by trying to speak truth. Trying to remind and point to the positive. Because one of the things that you were identifying was that you were fixating on a lot of untrue, unhelpful thoughts. And so for me to kind of be the secondary voice of going, oh yeah, that is so true, when it was. And, hey babe, I'm not sure that, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. I'm not sure, it is not true that you are not valuable. And trying to just provide a voice of truth as a supporter, not a fixer.
Emily, we have quite a few people watching in the room, online, Golden Heights. Would you mind taking a moment and to just share what your hope is for somebody who is sitting under the broom tree right now?
I know it's really hard to hold on to hope. And I know that guilt and that shame and that negative thinking feels real, but it's not. It's really not real. It's a lie. And there is help for you. There is abundant love for you. There is abundant space and time for you to take to heal and get the help that you need. And the breath in your lungs is valuable, and your existence is so precious.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dirk.
Thank you. You're not alone. And there's hope. Today's hope looks like a tiny piece of bread and a little shot glass of juice. It's a small thing. It's manna. It's dust. But it points to something so much bigger, something so much greater. Church, I want to invite you to stand up, all of our locations, online as well, wherever you are. You're part of this. We're recognizing this together. So this act is called communion. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. We've got stations set up throughout the auditoriums. You're invited to use the inside aisles to come forward, outside aisles to return to your seat. It might be a little bit of a trip, but it helps keep organized and stay in the moment. I want to invite you to, if this is your first time at Encounter, first time to church in general, if you find the need for this particular kind of nourishment, celebrate with us. If you find yourself drawn to Jesus and believing in his death and resurrection, believing too that his death provides your new life, come forward and to celebrate communion with us. If you're not sure yet, if you're not there, that's okay. We're going to keep on worshiping. You can stay in your seat. We're just so glad that you're here with us. It's in these moments that we come back to an ancient scripture where we hear one more time that on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he broke bread and he said, "This is my body. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after the meal, he took the cup and he said, "This is the blood of my righteousness. Do this in remembrance of me. For when you eat this bread and you drink from this cup, we proclaim the death of Christ until he comes again." These are the gifts of God for the people of God.